Freedom of the press is not just important to democracy, it is democracy. Walter Cronkite said that, the most trusted man in America at the time. Today, we're taking a closer look at Donald Trump's relentless campaign to break the American press, a campaign something much larger and more dangerous. If you take a look around today, you'll see Donald Trump employing not one dramatic seizure of power, but a steady, deliberate coordination and capture of institutions that underpin our civil society, from law firms and universities to independent agencies and cultural pillars like the Smithsonian. There's a German word that bears understanding here, Gleichschaltung, which translates into English as bringing into line or coordination. Historians use that term to describe how the Nazi regime methodically bent every societal institution one by one to the party's will. As fascism expert Jason Stanley says of Trump, quote, he's going to target the universities, the schools. This process is called Gleichschaltung in the literature on Nazi Germany, where every organization, every government institution turns loyalist-like and is transformed. Their employees are replaced by people loyal to the leader and loyal to the party. And Trump has already announced he's going to do this, so he's already announced a full fascist plan, end quote. That plan now reaches into America's most foundational institutions. The director of the Dwight Eisenhower Presidential Library, for example, was recently ousted after refusing to hand over a ceremonial sword simply because Donald Trump wanted to present that sword as a personal gift to King Charles. What do you do when the president asks you to help him loot public property? The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Yet this week, the target is once again America's oldest watchdog, the essential bridge between we the governed and those who govern. A free press is the backbone of American democracy. Without it, a vital link between voters and those who wield power in their name is severed. At the Pentagon this week, dozens of news organizations from across the political spectrum were nearly unanimous in rejecting the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's new rules, severely limiting their access to information. Under this new policy, which reporters were told to sign if they wanted to continue getting access, journalists are asked not to gather or report any information that hasn't been pre-approved, or they risk losing their credentials. The policy also asks Defense Department personnel to submit any information that they have shared with the media for prior review, even if it was unclassified. This is an unprecedented attempt to control what reporters can learn and how much the public is allowed to know. So rather than sign what amounts to a censorship agreement, veteran reporters boxed up years of notes, handed in their badges, and walked out together. It was a resounding no, a rejection of an attempt to eviscerate the free press and the very notion of public accountability. At a time when so many institutions are folding, it was a powerful reminder of how to unify and how to resist. As The Atlantic's Nancy Youssef put it, starting Wednesday, for the first time since the Pentagon opened in 1943, there will likely be no major news outlets accredited to cover the department, the one spending nearly $1 trillion of taxpayer money. Major news outlets, meanwhile, including NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, issued a rare joint statement saying, today we join virtually every other news organization in declining to agree to the Pentagon's new requirements, which would restrict journalists' ability to keep the nation and the world informed of important national security issues. The policy is without precedent and threatens core journalistic protections. We will continue to cover the U.S. military as each of our organizations has done for many decades, upholding the principles of a free and independent press. Upholding the principles of a free and independent press. The Pentagon Press Association, which represents journalists from around the world, blasted Hegseth for what it called an unprecedented message of intimidation. Quote, our members did nothing to create this disturbing situation. It arises from an entirely one-sided move by Pentagon officials apparently intent upon cutting the American public off from information they do not control and pre-approve, end quote. An internal government document, first obtained by the Washington Post, shows that only 15 people out of hundreds of credentialed reporters agreed to the new press restrictions. Of those 15, 2 came from the pro-Trump cable network One America News, one from a fringe right-wing website, another from the Epoch Times, a Chinese propaganda outfit notorious for trafficking in conspiracy theories. The remaining 11 included freelancers for foreign-based organizations and a handful of little-known independent sites that appear to publish almost exclusively on social media. NPR's Tom Bowman explained why he chose to hand in his badge rather than sign the pledge. Quote, "The American public deserves to know what's going on." Because that's the point of a free press. Not a friendly press, a free press. The timing of Hegseth's censorship pledge is perhaps no accident when an administration toys with deploying troops into more American cities, flirts with invoking the Insurrection Act, and advances covert war plans against Venezuela under the legally flimsy guise of a war on drugs, all while withholding information even from members of its own party. The fewer questions that reporters ask, the better for the government. Back to that German word, Gleichschalten. Bringing into line, you don't need to actually ban the press to shrink the public's right to know. You just have to make publishing every story a legal risk. Make every source a potential felon. Make every reporter a potential witness, or worse, make every reporter a potential criminal. Censorship largely never sustains in a democracy. History shows what breaks the information blackout: whistleblowers and leaks. They serve as a vital check on government abuses. As Gabe Brotman of the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press explains, quote, "Official Washington has been leaking like a sieve since the founding of the country." To give just two examples, in the 19th century, the Senate used to lock reporters in committee rooms until they disclosed their sources, with no success. And the history of the 1970s could not have been written without leaks. From Deep Throat to the Pentagon Papers, through much of American history, law enforcement recognized and internalized the sensitivity of investigating reporters and their sources. The Department of Justice, for instance, has guidelines that govern when and how it can investigate the media, which were strengthened to protect the press under Attorney General Eric Holder. In other words, whistleblowers and leaks are historically how the government has been held accountable. But rather than accept that scrutiny as a feature of democracy, Trump is working to crack down on it. According to the Pentagon Press Association, Hegseth's new rules convey, quote, "an unprecedented message of intimidation to everyone within the Department of Defense, warning against unapproved interactions with the press, and even suggesting that it is criminal to speak without express permission," which plainly it is not. The Trump administration's assault on a free press, and by extension on your right to know what your government is doing in your name with your taxpayer dollars, has unfolded in phases. Phase one has been to delegitimize and replace. He filled the briefing room with allies. He repeatedly labeled press that has been critical of him as fake enemies of the people, traitors, corrupt, and disloyal. The repetition of those words is no accident. It serves to erode public trust, to make citizens doubt even credible reporting so that only the government's narrative seems reliable. Phase two is soft coercion. This includes enforcing access rules, having reporters sign pledges, filing frivolous defamation suits, issuing regulatory threats, all designed to make editors ask, is this story worth the hassle? Soft coercion, by the way, includes weaponizing approval for media mergers, using legal settlements to teach networks that criticism carries a price. Since taking office, Donald Trump has sued the New York Times, CBS News, ABC News, the Wall Street Journal, and the Associated Press. The administration even limited the AP's access after it refused to adopt the president's preferred Gulf of America label for the Gulf of Mexico. It has seized control of the press corps itself, eliminating the decades-long reserved seat for Associated Press and Reuters and Bloomberg and replacing them with right-wing outlets. The result is a press corps transformed into an ecosystem that's designed to punish scrutiny, but to reward loyalty to the administration. Phase three is when they bring out the hammer, and we're seeing glimpses of it now. Experts warn that this is where all this is heading: the weaponization of national security law, especially the Espionage Act, to criminalize journalism. It means dragging reporters into leak investigations, threatening sources, chilling reporting after publication. Restraint once kept the statute aimed at spies. Trump's first term saw reporters' phone and email records secretly seized. And with Attorney General Pam Bondi recently scrapping the Justice Department's bright line rule, barring that practice, the door is now open to turn to the criminal code, where the soft pressure fails. Project 2025 spelled out the plan clearly, by the way. It directs the Department of Justice to treat whistleblowing as espionage. Think about that. Roll back protections for reporters, deploy the FBI's counterintelligence program to hunt down sources, and, quote, use all of the tools at its disposal to investigate leaks. And yet, there are still guardrails that work when we use them. Major outlets, even those typically friendly to this White House, refused the Pentagon's pledge en masse. An NPR PBS NewsHour Marist poll found that nearly 8 in 10 Americans say the government's gone too far in restricting free speech. Quinnipiac polling shows a dramatic mood shift since Trump returned to office. Voters went from plus 19 net optimistic to negative 10 net pessimistic on free speech. That's overreach the country can feel. When the administration tried to silence Jimmy Kimmel, people spoke up. They organized, they boycotted, they used their voices and their wallets to confront Trump's authoritarianism, and their voices prevailed. And while Jimmy Kimmel is a comedian, covering the Pentagon carries different stakes for the American people and for public accountability because it involves taxpayer money, national security decisions, and people's lives. It's essential to democracy that journalists be able to scrutinize it. The goal of all of this is to make you feel powerless, to convince you that your voice doesn't matter, but your voice is the guardrail. They cannot silence it unless they silence all of us. Gleichschaltung does not arrive in one dramatic sweep. It drips in phases. A credential revoked here, a subpoena dropped there, a museum label quietly rewritten, a campus silenced, a newsroom deciding a story isn't worth the fight. You get used to it. Don't allow yourself to get used to it. I will keep saying this as long as you need to hear it because the fight against authoritarianism is only going to intensify. Guardrails work, but only if we use them. As Edward R. Murrow warned, no one man can terrorize a whole nation unless we are all his accomplices. Unless we are all his accomplices. These are not accomplices right now. This weekend, right now, this is live. Millions of Americans are taking to the streets. This is New York City, not 2 blocks from where I am, with a simple reminder. This nation exists because it once said no to a king. It will endure because it will continue to say no to would-be kings.